Good morning. Good morning. Today is an amazing day. We're here at the Center for Male Engagement of Pierce College in Philadelphia, PA. And today we're excited to continue our speaker spotlight conversation. Today we have our doctor, very own Dr. Hasani C. Carter. He is the executive director for EOF in the Office of the Secretary of Higher Education for the state of New Jersey. He has been in this work for many years, has been in this current role upwards of 4 years, and have been working out of this office for at least the past 7 to 8 years, with many, many more years of experience in this work, impacting, causing change, leading many spaces of influence. And we're excited to have him today. If you can, I know that you're not here with us live, but if you can give a virtual hand clap as you watch this for the very own Dr. Carter. Good morning to you, sir. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm well. I'm well. Thank you. And how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited about today because we have a spotlight on you. We're going to be talking a little bit about the types of things that have kind of shaped your trajectory professionally. We're not going to get too personal, but as personal as you want to go. The door is open here, but we're kind of just really just want to get to know the man behind the title, but then also what has emerged through your life as principles, as standards, and just what character traits you believe are really necessary for advancement to be possible in our populations, but most specifically our Black and brown men of color. So I kind of want to open up the conversation today, and kind of just start with talking a little bit about your background and how you came into work of just being connected into higher education. How did that happen?
So I came to higher education through what I considered a different route, meaning that when I originally started college, my journey in higher ed, I majored in biology with the intention of possibly practicing as a physician. And actually went through the entire process. Went to get my master's in public health. Actually was enrolled in medical school. And at the time, the medical school that I was enrolled in, phenomenal institution, but something kept speaking to my spirit that I wasn't doing what I was destined or designed to do. Nothing wrong with the field of medicine, but just something kept speaking to my spirit. And ironically, in my interview, they asked me, where did you see yourself in 20, 30 years? One of those forward vision kind of things. And I said, I saw myself not necessarily practicing medicine. Sorry, I'm in a space where I have cubicles, so you could probably hear my neighbors, so I apologize. But I saw myself more so working with students and really helping them. And as I said at the time, as a physician, I could impact X number of lives, right? But if I could get more physicians into medical schools, especially those who come from backgrounds of underrepresentation, like myself, uh, I saw myself as magnifying the impact of helping others. So if I could get 10 students to become doctors, imagine the impact that that would have. So it wasn't necessarily just focused on me, but more so focused on helping others. So then I took a leave and went to pursue my PhD at NYU, and then realized I didn't need to go back and finish the medical degree to do the kind of work that I wanted to do. And so that led me to working with opportunity programs in New York and then subsequently in New Jersey, and then was offered the opportunity to come to the state and to have a more statewide impact. So
Wow, wow. And that's phenomenal for many, many reasons. And even in that, I believe that you dropped a couple bars as it relates to the pursuit of purpose and how the sound of purpose changed your trajectory professionally, and it steered you in a direction that you weren't necessarily originally headed in. I kind of want to rest there for a minute because I believe a lot of our students often are kind of challenged to know it all from freshman year when they come in. What degree are you pursuing? What major are you going to choose? And from your own testimony, you were in the process, well into the process, already past your baccalaureate, past your graduate degree, and an interview for medical school is where you're finding that maybe this isn't what you should be doing. What kind of a message would you give to students that are trying to figure it out, right? They know what fields should make them successful, what kind of professions are valuable from a dollar for dollar exchange. Oh, this particular role can earn me this much, which is the way a lot of our men look at which degree programs they want to pursue. What message would you give to them as they're looking to pursue and figure out what it is that they want to do?
So I just want to offer some clarification. I was actually in medical school beyond the interview. And I remember sitting in a lecture and saying to myself, this is it. It's just a couple more years and, you pass the boards and
So you almost done.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. And I remember sitting down with my mentor, and I'm huge on mentors because they provide a tremendous role in helping to guide people. And for me, I didn't have anybody in my family who had traveled the path that I had been down and had done the things that I had aspired to do. And so, the best that my father could do, he's a 47-year veteran for the U.S. Army. The best that he could do for me is just say, hey, um, keep your nose clean and work as hard as you can, no matter what you decide to do. And so, I would say to students that even though you don't know exactly what you want to do, that shouldn't change your work ethic.
Mm,
Okay. That you should pursue every class and every venture with the same attitude, the same discipline, the same level of commitment. Okay. And it's only through that process that you learn about yourself in terms of your drive. And it also says a lot about you as a person and as a professional. What I often hear is, well, I wasn't really feeling that. So I wasn't really all in. Okay, well, I understand that, but that shouldn't change the level of effort that you put into something. Okay. There's a lot of things that can be learned through all processes, whether it be successful or not as successful. And so again, I just remember sitting there and having a conversation with my mentor who um, was basically saying, I'm waiting for you to graduate medical school so we can get you signed up in our residency program. And after your residency program, we bring you on and have you working. And then this would be your first year salary post residency. And I saw that number and he had it on a piece of paper, which was motivation to me. I actually used that piece of paper in my interview with NYU, and they said, "Why are you interested in coming to higher ed?" And I said, "Well, to be frank with you, I would be making more money as a physician than I would as potentially as a higher ed admin." Okay, and then I showed them the amount of money that I was scheduled to potentially be making, and I said, based on my research, I don't think your president makes this much, but I would be okay financially. But I'm not motivated by that. I know some people are, and that's fine. If that's what moves you and gets you up in the morning, that's fine. But I have a strong faith-based approach to things, and said that as long as I'm doing what God has designed me to do, all of my needs will be taken care of.
mm,
And so, again, having that conversation was important. Um, and then exploring the different aspects of yourself as you continue to develop as a young professional is important. Not necessarily thinking that everything has to align with what you think your career goal is. Because if you'd have asked my 20-year-old self, I was hell bent on this is what's going to happen, and was doing everything that I needed to do to make sure that all the things that would help me be competitive and help me get that goal would be achieved, right? Doing the summer studies and doing the internships and meeting with my counselors and going to advising and going to tutoring, even though I had an A in a class, just to make sure that I had an A. Okay. Because I always remembered this phrase that my mother would always say to me: it's expensive to fail.
mm.
And I didn't understand. I thought she meant like, oh, I wouldn't have a successful job. She's like, no, that means you got to take a class twice. Who in their right mind wants to pay twice as much for something?
Right.
And so, whether you want to pursue a career in business, want to pursue a career in medicine, whether pursue in field X, that doesn't again change your work ethic and your need to do well. Okay. And so what she was really trying to get me to understand is that I didn't need to allow for excuses to be my barrier. And I needed to get out of my own way and let my pride and my ego kind of subside a little bit and be willing to acknowledge when I was struggling. One of the reasons why sometimes I didn't feel comfortable talking to my advisors was because I didn't want to acknowledge that I wasn't doing as well as I thought, but not realizing that they were really there to help. Right. And that's
Mhm.
why, again, I think mentors are important because, talking with someone who has my best interest at heart, but was willing to give me tough love in the way that they knew that I needed it was important to be able to say, hey, um, if this is what you want to do, I need you to go after it with the same passion, the same dedication, the same focus that you came to this space with. And that's what I did. And had a conversation with the folks at NYU, was given the opportunity to be admitted. And again, I always say, as long as you are living your authentic purpose and self um, and are genuine about it, um, things will continue to happen for you, hopefully.
Yeah. Wow. Um, that resonates. That resonates for me personally. My original path was the direction that kind of uh would be aligned with the person looking for the check. I spent most of my 20s switching professions, switching majors, just looking for the place where I could get the biggest bag. And it was interesting because faith is a very critical component of my life. But at different times, I also have a switch where I've been able to turn off the soundboard that's giving me direction when I have a direction that I want to go myself. And I can distinctly hear. I've never been someone that says, "Oh, I heard God tell me something," but I remember specifically I was in my senior year of high school, and God told me that I should go into education. But the only way that I could imagine education was my experience in high school, which was teachers who are stressed out, a principal who seemed like he wasn't necessarily happy. His car wasn't nice. They didn't look like they had money. They didn't look happy. And I'm like, there's no way that I want to be involved with the type of kids that we were in school. Forget that. I'm going to find a way to make the most money as fast as possible, and I'm going to do my thing. But when I turned and learned that switch needs to stay on and do whatever that switch says, I ended up back in education and have had a pretty swift transition into higher ed and moving into different roles. So I can affirm that is absolutely spot on, and it's been a personal imprint on my life living through that lens. And I think a lot of times, from another point of what you shared, our inclination to make moves and make decisions based on our feelings can sometimes be the worst things that we can do. So that concept of working hard with despite how we feel. I think especially since COVID, there's this almost I think there was a lack of sensitivity prior to COVID. And firstly, let me just put out there, a lot of us are tired of even hearing about COVID anyway. But the fact that that time period existed and it was so pervasive for at least 3 years and still affects a lot of things happening now, we can't act like it didn't happen. In a lot of ways, I think there's a hypersensitivity now, where folks are a lot more passionate about following their feelings more now than ever before. So for you to kind of speak the way you did, I think that's definitely valuable, and I'm confident that somebody got something out of that. And when we talk about mentorship, especially when we talk about men and mentorship, what does that look like through the lens of Dr. Carter? How do you picture men and mentorship? Because it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. Some people think Boys and Girls Club of America. Some people think going out and shooting basketball. But what does it look like when a man has a mentor?
So I think it's important that as young students, excuse me, pursue their academics and possible careers, that they start to identify that there can be more than one mentor, and that you can have a mentor for different purposes. I have a mentor who guides me professionally. I have a couple of them. I have a couple of mentors who guide me spiritually. I have a couple of mentors who help me understand how to be the best version of a dad I can be for my children. I have a couple of mentors who help me grow as a man in general. And, I would say that for me, it's also not limited by gender identification. And so I think it's important that no matter where you're situated in life, that you realize that it's a lot easier to get to where you want to be if you have help, if you have understanding, if you have guidance. I don't know anybody who's ever climbed the mountain alone. Not to say you can't do it, but it's so much harder and so difficult, right? And so, um, one of the things that I've always learned is through my mentors is just how to anticipate, how to prepare, how to get out of my head, how to deal with the ups, the downs, the in betweens, um, and how to network, how to communicate, how to, I think that first step that's required is to have a conversation with someone and ask them the question like, hey, would you mind being a mentor, help guiding me? Sometimes that can seem awkward because that may seem like a sign of help. Like I'm asking for help, I'm asking for your guidance. And you know, culturally, I don't know if some folks grow up in a way where that's seen as a positive. It could be looked at as, well, you're showing your weakness if you're asking for help. You need to be independent. You need to do it on your own. It's always kind of a mixed rhetoric that's out there, like, um, trust nobody, don't tell anybody your plans because then they'll sabotage you and things of that nature. And so I understand all of that, but there are some really, really good people out there. There's some good guys out there who all they want to do is just pay it forward. And you can tell that usually in a relationship, right? I remember the first person I asked if they would be my mentor, and they didn't even look up from their table, and they said, "Are you sure you know what you're asking for?" And I'm saying to myself, okay, this is a trick question. I think this is their way of telling me no, and I need to bow out at this point. And I said, well, with all due respect, I don't know what I don't know. So yes, I'm confident in my asking of you, but if you don't feel comfortable in advising me and guiding me, I completely respect that. Okay. And they said, okay, so I want to be very clear. Let's set some established rules. If you ask me to be your mentor, this is what you have to do. And then they went down the list. And they said, if you cannot adhere to all those at 100%, no excuses. I don't want to hear, I'm sorry, but you just have to be able to deliver. Then we can proceed forward. And I said, you know what? To be fair to you, can I have a day to think about it and get back to you? Because I don't want to be reactive because I want you to be my mentor and say yes if
Yeah.
I can't authentically give you what you're asking for, because you are going to be pouring more into me than I am into you. And so I thought about it and came back and said, yeah, I'm definitely willing to do what you're asking for. And I said, but I do have one contingency on this. And he said, what was that? I said, that you afford me the ability to always be authentic with me. Don't mix your words with me. If I'm stinky, then let me know I'm stinky. I need you to be the model for me in a way that my father couldn't. And that's not to put a knock on my dad. It's just my father just couldn't do that. And I know for some of our young men, they didn't have that in their lives. And so, again, it's saying, hey, I want you to pour into my cup. And part of their expectation of me is to pay it forward. And I said, all right, so I'm more than happy to do that. And so I continue to live a legacy of that, just saying, hey, if I can pour into anyone's cup, all I ask is that they pour it forward and pay it forward. So, but I think mentorship is huge, especially professionally as we begin to network. Um, I've noticed in a number of professional settings where you hear that adage, it's not what you know, but who you know. And that's huge because, in this competitive environment where there's so many people who have similar experiences and are equally as capable of doing an amazing job, you need somebody who's going to speak up for you, who's going to say, um, Mr. Jones is that guy. And I always say, you got to understand, you just can't ask somebody to be your mentor and expect for them to put their name on the line and you not deliver, because that's their reputation as well as yours. And so if you fail, that means any other person that they present is now going to be questioned because of what you did. And you have to own that, and you got to understand the magnitude of that and not be selfish. And there's times where I've had to say, I don't think I'm ready for this.
Mm.
As much as I know you're pushing for it, I don't think I'm ready, because if I step in this situation and I don't do what I think you believe I'm capable of doing, I'm going to make you look bad. And then what that does is creates an opportunity for conversation for them to share with me what I may or may not be seeing. And then, we talk about whether it's the right time to move forward. So,
That was phenomenal. I think you really just laid out a perfect, so almost as if you had a playbook where you laid out what it looks like prior to getting into that mentor relationship as a man. And just to highlight and spotlight some of those things that I was able to extract from this is having first the humility to pursue someone that's where you want to be, right? I think that's very huge. And then also being willing to hear whatever their response is, knowing that they may not say yes. It sounded like you were planning to be respectful whether he said yes or no, which I think is a huge mark to note, because a lot of times nowadays I believe there's this culture where, like you mentioned, a lot of students, a lot of people in general, regardless of whether they're a student or not, bring this approach, this star approach, as if I am already, um, I have everything that I need exclusive of anyone else. So it would be a privilege to you to be talking to me, even though you haven't done anything at all yet. Like, you're almost living vicariously through the dreams that you've dreamt but have never seen in real life. And they bring that kind of energy to spaces, which really makes it tough for someone who even has the ability to be a mentor to want to mentor you. And then I love from the other side of it, once you are in this mentor relationship, being aware enough to recognize that there's a mutual value that is going to be exchanged, where you're going to be in spaces and places that you didn't set the groundwork for. Your mentor set the groundwork for. So how are you going to deliver? How are you going to show up? Are you going to be just as intentional about delivering in those spaces, and using the agency, the social capital, the professional capital, whatever it is, and actually take things to the next level for yourself, but also representing your mentor well. I think that's very powerful, and I think it kind of shows the weight and the gravity of these types of situations that I think sometimes people really don't know how much really goes into it. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I also want to kind of talk a little bit about just what humility. I think humility is something that's really ringing for me right now. When it comes to just the pursuit of men, um, to be in community with other men. And this kind of offshoots from the mentor conversation as well, because separate from community is also the need for mentorship. But whenever we talk about supports, oftentimes, like you mentioned, men tend to have this approach, like you said, that I have to get it done on my own by myself, as if that's a badge of honor. But yet we also have value in being a part of a community, which have these competing value systems. When we talk about men and pursuing supports, and supports being available for men, how would you envision a program or a space where men are able to feel disarmed, to be able to say, hey, I'm struggling in these areas, or I can't necessarily see a place that I'm struggling, but I know that I need something to add value to myself, and I'm hoping this space can do that for me. How would you imagine a space like that would look? And we're talking about imaginative, or if you've seen a space already like this, um, what does that space look like? What components would you see in there?
um, that's a great question. I think it's important to realize or to recognize how each person comes to that space and what informs their kind of thinking and their guards, what puts up their guards. Um, what I tend to notice is that in group discussions, you have to have someone who's willing to take the lead and break the ice. Um, but in any space, first and foremost, the foundation has to be built on trust. It has to have a certain level of trust, and there has to be a trust that whatever is shared, it's kind of that adage, what happens here stays here. Um, because I don't think that in general people like to show their weaknesses. And so to be able to open up to share with someone some of the things that you may be thinking requires a certain level of trust. You have to trust that that person has your best interest. You have to trust that that person um, is willing to reciprocate and be as open with you as you are with them. Um, and I think, especially when one of the things that when I work with counselors is to say that, a counseling student relationship is two-way, not one way. Okay. I can always tell when a student is connecting with a counselor because that counselor has made every effort to open up. And again, I'm not saying you have to put all your business out there, but there is a feel, there's a way you can communicate and let people know how open and how receptive and how supportive you are and really help them understand that safe space of trust, and then from there you begin to build the conversations, you begin to dig and go a little deeper at the pace that the person is comfortable with, right? Sometimes if you're a mentor, you push a little bit, but um it's kind of like working out. You don't throw 300 pounds on the weight bar if you don't know the person can lift at least 145. So, I could say, oh, you look like a big, strong guy. Let's throw up this 405. And you're like, oh, well, hold on. Can we can we work towards that? So right there, I can already have set something for you that may not be something that you're ready for yet, and in that sense, a signal and a tone. So I think it's important to continue to have dialogues to build. Um, I think it's important to recognize that relationships take time to build. That trust factor takes time. What I tend to notice when I'm working with students is that they want to go from A to Z right away. I want to know how I can be the CEO in next year. And it's like, okay, well, that's going to take a little bit of time. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying that, even if you had the resources to do that, are you set up to be successful? Do you
Yeah,
understand the challenges of that? So in terms of creating a space where dialogue and conversations of building, that's how I look at it, can happen. I think it's important again to set that tone early, um, to be open, and to, you say the word humility. um, I don't know how everyone comes to the space. I just always have to be willing to say, I'm guided by my faith. I don't say that to offend. I don't say that to make people feel uncomfortable, to say, oh, you're going to try to get me to convert. No, I'm not. You have to make that decision. I'm not here to teach you. I'm just going to live through example. And if you are interested in getting in that kind of conversation, it's available. If not, at least you know what drives and motivates me and what guides my thought process and thinking. And so, however you choose to kind of adopt that in your own rationale, you'll govern that accordingly. But again, I always just simply come to things with the same humility as I'm taught through my faith.
that's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. Even what you said, it really just emanated value from something that I've instituted at the Center for Male Engagement. And it's a phrase that our male students, they need to belong before they perform. And uh, a lot of times I think that we really judge our student populations, regardless of, what background they have. We say our good students are the ones who make this particular GPA, who are particularly connected to all of the resources that we offer. Are the first ones. They arrive on time. They dress the way we would like for them to dress. They speak the way we would like for them to speak. And the truth of the matter is, every relationship is two ways. And if we already have, and one of the most toxic traits of a relationship is when you have expectations that were not communicated or accepted at the front end, right? So as soon as you meet a student, if you have this long list of things that you expect them to do in order to be considered good, in order to be considered valuable, if these things are in place on your side, then you're really not there to support the student. You're there to create a replication of a previous student that you've already seen, or maybe yourself or whomever, um, which isn't fair to that student's experience. So I really strongly appreciate that, and I believe that, especially when, because there's so much more of a focus, especially since a lot more institutions are aware and are aware of the needs that are around programs for men of color. Understanding that the institutions inherently don't connect to the culture of many of our young men, that there is a lot more work that's needed to kind of find ways to allow them to find the institutions to be an extension of home. What does that look like? We don't change the entire campus, but do we have a space? Is there somewhere that I can just kick back, relax, and feel like I don't have to try to fit in because I already belong? And I really think that that's something that we really have to double down on. I think this is a great transition to talk about the work that's really been amplified in the state of New Jersey. Firstly, I must put my hands together for the work that's been happening in New Jersey with men of color programs. We there was a and it's tough to not say we because it was very recent that I was a part of the work in from the seat of Rutgers University Camden, but to now be on the outside and just see how much it's grown, how many more institutions are a part of that. Could you speak a little bit about kind of the beginnings of the statewide Men of Color initiative and kind of like where it started into where it is now?
Yeah, could you just give me 1 second? I apologize.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
IT gentleman was finishing up my laptop and needed my password to log back in. Um, so here in New Jersey, um, and in reference to the Men of Color Initiative, um, it kind of grew organically. A few years ago, um, a number of men within the EOF got together and started to have conversations about what this would look like, what the statewide initiative would look like, um, and asked me, would something like this be possible and would it be supported by our office? And of course, I said absolutely. Um, the key is that we work in partnership to make sure that the initiatives that are undertaking are supportable. Let me just say it that way. Because not every great idea is something that we can unfortunately support. It could be like, well, we want to buy every student a brand new car. Well, we can't fund that. Um, at least not with our current resources. But what are some things that we could do? Can we create spaces and conversations about mental health for our young men of color? Can we talk about what does it mean to even identify as a young man of color? How are we identifying the color spectrum? Because I think sometimes that phrase and that statement can also give the impression that it's only for black and brown, when in fact the statement is not. It's intended to be inclusive. of all shades of colors. And so, how do we ensure that all of our um, brothers who identify as brothers and or want to identify are able to feel like they can participate, and also our allies in those spaces? How can we help include them? And so, I wanted to push the group to really think beyond just the conversations of, how can we provide mentorship and how can we provide guidance, but really helping address the full student and the full professional as well. And so my hat goes off to the professional association because they do a tremendous job of doing all of this work, and I look at them as the frontline folks who are seeing the day to day and are feeling the day to day in a way that I've been a little bit removed from because I've come to the state office. So it's a little bit different when you're seeing, the effects of, for example, the pandemic, when the student's in front of you. I hear and I see it, but it's a little bit different than when you're actually working with the students as they're,
Right.
you know, talking about their live situation. And I think the pandemic only helped to provide a greater spotlight on a lot of the issues and challenges that we knew were going on. But because of um, the pandemic, it allowed us to pivot. And, as uh, the country was coming to a racial awakening of sorts with, George Floyd and many others, we had an opportunity to just pause and just talk and to really bring light to concerns and issues that um, I think that sometimes got overlooked just because people were so busy with the hustle and bustle of everything. And, the pandemic just said, okay, everybody has to pause and let's really, look at some of these things and how we're going to be different when we come back from this. And if anything, if the pandemic showed that we're all brothers and sisters and we need to care. This thing doesn't care if you're black, brown, or purple. It will take you. It took many, many of my family members. And so I think it said to all of us to say, hey, what can I do to help you? I see you. I acknowledge you. You want to be great. How can I help you in helping you reach your greatness? And how can you reciprocate that to others? So I don't know if that answered your question or if I went on a tangent, but
No, no, it's absolutely right on target, right on target. And I think it really sets the stage for our last question here today. And with the things that have been instituted, with the response to George Floyd and a lot of the other tragedies that have happened in the midst of the pandemic, how do you see the landscape of higher education evolving in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and belonging as it relates to men of color, in spaces of, really, I said higher education, but since you're working in the state office, let's say from the state into the higher education, how do you see things evolving?
well, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that the current administration has done a phenomenal job in recognizing the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in all aspects of state government. And that trickles down into the work that we do here at OSHI and the work that we try to partner with our institutions. And I think higher ed has come to a point where um, you have to realize that there is a tremendous gain that is to be had um, by being intentional in these spaces. And it's not just something that you throw in a mission statement and say, we support diversity, inclusion, and the DEIB stuff work. Um, you actually have to live it. And what does that look like? And be willing to have uncomfortable conversations. And quite frankly, some institutions may be challenged by that. It may challenge the status quo. And I know that makes the work for those who are being asked to come in to help create change that much more challenging, because the real question is, are you really ready for change? Or are you just trying to give the appearance that you're interested in change? And those are two different things, and that's important. And so, I think it's important that higher ed continues to uh, serve as an example for the broader society that as we learn and know better, we will do better, and that we are intentional about our efforts, that we are intentional in creating spaces for our students. I always say if students are the center of what we do, then they should be involved in all of our conversations. And what is that going to look like? Because the student today that's coming to our colleges and universities is very different than when I went to school. And so, as much as I may know what the college experience looks like based on my experience and my experience on as a student and working on campus, it's going to be different for when my children eventually matriculate into higher ed. And so, I need to be acknowledging. I have to acknowledge that and be willing to have them their voice at the table to um, make sure that their voice is incorporated into our decisions, and to help young folks, and I say young folks, I don't mean that as a reference of age, meaning that those who are new to the higher ed space, understand that whether you're in higher ed, whether you're in just the general public, your voice matters and you have to speak up. You can't just be the person on the sideline complaining. You are a participant in this game of life. And so, as was said to me by my biggest mentor of life, which is my mother, um, would you allow someone to come in your house and take your food and walk out and say nothing? Probably not. So she uses that metaphor to basically imply to me that you need to be willing to speak up when something doesn't feel right, when something doesn't look right, when you don't feel like you're being represented. Sometimes it's not intentional, and sometimes I think we can go from A to angry, feeling awesome to angry real quick because we're like, why didn't you think of it? Well, I think you should approach it a little differently. Maybe they didn't think about it because they didn't know. Well, they should have known. Well, how are they going to know if that's not their world situation? Nothing told them to think about it. So again, it's hard sometimes to be intentional, but this is where it's uncomfortable. This is where you have to bring people to the space to say, what am I not thinking about? What am I missing the mark on? How do we make sure that we're involving the right folks in these kind of conversations? And um, for students, again, to be willing to own their education. We have a director that would always say to their students, "You are the CEO of your life. You are the CEO of your education.
Mm.
So why would you let anyone else tell you what to do with your company?" And so own that and make sure that you are an active participant in that process. So
Well, I think you just dropped the mic right there with that. I would say you dropped many bars. I'm sure our students, our staff, our community partners, they'll get a lot of value out of our conversation today. On behalf of Pierce College, I want to thank you for spending some time with us for a conversation. We'd love to invite you to some in-person opportunities down the road as schedules permit. But it's definitely been an honor and a privilege to have you in this space. And we want to thank you for those who are listening. For being a part of this as well. I know that you're watching this not in real time, but it still took some time to tap in and hear about the life, the background, and just to get some of the value that Dr. Carter shared with us today. So I want to thank you for partnering with us for a couple moments. And my hope is that you'll look to connect with us as there are going to be many opportunities throughout this year and all forthcoming in regards to in-person engagements, virtual engagements. Our hope is that, as I mentioned before, that all men that are connected to the Center for Male Engagement will belong before they perform. Because when you touch a man, you touch a family. When you touch a family, you touch a community. And when you touch a community, you can change a city. And we believe that that is our commitment. Thank you again and have a great day.
thank you.